Greetings, Earthlings. Today we're going to talk about changing a handlebar swivel post on a Grillo G110. This is the new one we're going to put on here. So what happens sometimes on these things, some of the earlier tractors that were produced in the G110s, this post didn't have good welds holding it into the rest of this handle assembly. So if the welds weren't good and you're putting a lot of force on the thing, the welds can crack, and you'll notice you have a problem when the handlebars get really wobbly like that. This one actually was still in service. This is our demo machine. It's pretty old. It's like a 2014 model, so it's 11 years old now. But I noticed the other day mowing hay that it was just looser than it should be, and I'm like, well, those welds have finally cracked on the thing. Gave us 11 years, so it's not too bad. Anyway, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and disconnect our gear shift levers here. Pull these things out of there and just get them up out of the way, because we're going to have to remove this whole handle column from the pivot post. So let's push those up, set these pins aside. Then we've got, do we actually have a ratchet? Let's see. Josh set out some tools for me here, but he did it the crude old-fashioned way, where I'm using 2 wrenches on these bolts. Look at Josh. He one-handed, he gives me a ratchet. Man, this is the guy. All right, so we're going to remove these 2 nuts and bolts down at the bottom here. I've got the handlebars rotated around to the mowing position now, as you can see, the front PTO position. You can do this operation with the handles in either mode, though, mowing or tilling. It really doesn't matter. Although, I think it is. Yeah, it really doesn't matter, because you can leave this cable attached over here, can't you? Let me think about this. No, you can't. So, all right, well, let me revise that statement. You have to do this with the handlebars in the mowing position, because with the handles in the mowing position, this reverser assembly is flipped in such a way that you can get to this cable clamp bolt. If this thing is flipped over so that the smart reverse system is in the other mode, that is the soil working mode, you can't get to that because it's on the bottom. So yes, I accidentally did this right. Yay! So now that we've taken these 2 nuts and bolts out, we are going to get this little tab out of here. This is the tab, has this little spot right here in the tab that goes into a groove on the post. Here's the post. It goes like that, and it keeps you from getting the handlebars up off the thing. It retains the handlebars down onto the post. Now that that is out, the handlebars will actually lift off that post. So we are also going to get a wrench to take that little clamp loose.
Right here.
Oh, did you get that already? Oh yeah, you did. Oh gosh, you're the guy. I was looking for a T-wrench. That's what I normally use, but he had a regular wrench. Okay, I'll loosen up the reverse cable. Take it out of here. Cable end is pretty messed up, so take a minute to get it worked back out of that clamp. Probably replace this cable. It's all frayed and nasty here anyway. There we go. And don't lose this little thing. This little guide goes on the end of it. That's a separate part than the cable right there. So if that flies off the end when you got this off, well, you've just lost that part. So I'll stick this back up here someplace. Actually, pull that guide off the end so it doesn't get lost. All right, now the handlebars are free, or they're able to be pulled up off of this post. Now all the rest of the cables are still attached to your clutch and brake cables and things like that, but they can just stay there. I'm just gonna lift these handlebars up off the pivot post. There we go. And just kind of lay them up here on the engine off to the side, get them out of the way. There's enough give in the cables that they can just sit right off to the side there and not get in the way of anything. Sometimes there are some shims on here. Oh yeah, you can see those welds are broke because that thing is moving around. Not bad, but it's enough. And if you see some shims on here, collect those because they have to go back. And there's also this gear. This gear needs to slide up off here. This is the gear that indexes the handles to turn around. This gear meshes with this other gear down in here, and that gear is what flips over the smart reverse assembly, as you can see. So that has to go back in the right place. That tab I took out earlier, which I can't seem to locate now. What did I do with that thing? There it is. The tab I took out that locates the handlebars down, the bottom of that tab right here drops into that slot. So it locks the handlebars in with that gear. So when you drop that back down, that has to go right under the slot in the back. And there's a few more shims on top here, but I'm just going to leave all the shims in place. They need to stay there. Set that aside. All right, now we're going to get this thing that flips the gear, that flips the reverser assembly over. That has to come out. So we're going to use a 10mm wrench. Undo the one bolt on this side of it. Yeah, let's get the gear shift out of the way there so you can see. Now this is a little safety deal right here that keeps you from accidentally engaging fourth gear when you've got the thing in the mowing mode or the front PTO mode. Because fourth gear on a G110 only goes toward the engine. If you could engage fourth gear while you have the handlebars turned around to the mowing position, you would run yourself over at about 9 miles an hour, so that is not happy. So this thing actually indexes around with the rest of the smart reverse assembly to give you a safety to keep yourself safe in the mowing mode so you can't access the transport speed. I don't know why this bolt is so stubborn, but anyway, this is a real life video, right? This is an old crappy machine, just like the one you have at home. This spent too much time out in the rain and all that sort of thing, so it's, you know, just as hard to get apart as you know, something that's in the real world. Come on, you bugger. You'd think as it came out it would get easier. But the point is with this safety thing that it actually will index to this shaft when you put it back together. When I get the shaft out of there, well actually I'm going to have the safety off here in a minute. So that you'll see there's two flat sides here. And when you put it back onto the shaft itself has two little flat sides. You can't really see it too well until I get the shafts out of there, but anyway, it'll lock in so it only can go in one orientation. You can't really screw that up. Okay, now, then we have to pull this shaft, which runs through the bottom of this thing, out. The easiest way to do that, we're going to take off this bolt that holds the whole reverser assembly onto the side of the transmission. Set aside that washer and bolt, right? Nice big washer on there and a lock washer on the outside. And then we're going to take this whole thing off like so. Now this spring is a little compressed. Normally that spring is going to have a little more push than that. I'm probably going to go ahead and replace this spring while I'm in there. These springs do wear out every few years just from being repeatedly compressed. This is the spring that brings your reverse cable back to the forward position, basically. And they just get mashed down. They cost about $3, so it's just a good idea. And you can change it just by taking off that one bolt. You don't have to take off the rest of this stuff. And then you can slide this end out of the support piece and, you know, cock this up and just change the spring. So it's, I think you might have to undo the cable, but you don't have to undo everything I did here. But just mentioning that in the future, it might be a good idea to change it every now and then. Because if it gets too weak, it doesn't want to pull the reverse cable back and you get gear grinding. There's a little washer on there too. I'm just going to set that whole assembly aside. All right, and then you've got this deal. Now, I will need probably a long nose pliers, which I failed to get, but I'll get it. Josh, it's all right. Come on off camera for a second.
How about up, second row?
Here. That'll work. All right, so I'm gonna need to reach in under here to grab this gear, this kind of vertically oriented gear here. That gear, this shaft that slides all the way through and comes out the other side goes right through that gear. The gear has a hole in the middle, And the gear has the 2 flattened off spots on it, just like the end of this thing. So it can only go on there through one way. But what we found out is that there is a right and a wrong way to put that gear on. That is, if you were to flip the gear over 180 degrees, the teeth are not timed the same. So it's got to go back in there the way you took it out. If you notice the way, when I took this thing apart, this piece here, this thing on the side, your smart reverser assembly, was oriented in line with the top of the transmission. That is, it was straight. It wasn't cocked up like this and wasn't cocked down like this. That's because the handlebars were oriented straight forward and back. They weren't cocked to either side. So if the handlebars are straight, this thing should be pretty much straight. It might be a few degrees off, but it's going to be mostly straight. And that's the way it has to go back in. When you put it back together, you notice this is up or cocked any funny way, you didn't get it right. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of grab this gear and sort of wiggle a little bit. You can see that the gear is wiggling, right? And it's kind of wiggling independent of the shaft. Now this one's an older tractor and it's got a lot of time on it. So there's some wear on this shaft and gear, and that's fine. And it's going to come out of here real easy. So I can just grab this thing and just slide the shaft right out the side, as you can see here. You back up a little bit. Yeah, it just slides right in and out with very little work. Now some of these, if the tractor hasn't been in service as long, or if you've left it outside too much and there's too much rust built up on that shaft, it's going to be pretty tight in that gear, and you might really have to work on kind of wiggling that thing around to kind of relieve the tension on it as you pull the shaft out. I mean, we've had some where it took like a half an hour to get them out of there because it was so badly corroded. But, you know, if it comes out right, it's just going to slide right out of there. Set that aside. We take this gear, if you kind of take your pliers and just roll the whole pliers sideways down out of here, the whole gear comes right out like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lean this up against something like right here, and I know that that's the way it needs to go back in there, because it needs to slide in just like that and go up. I kind of set it with that end up. Whatever helps you remember that. That's probably a dumb place to put it, because if I roll the tractor a little bit, it's going to fall off. So I'm just going to set it down over here in that same orientation. And then the last thing, not least, is breaking loose these 2 great big nuts and bolts that hold this thing down. There we go. These are a 22 millimeter. The other tools I've used have been 13 millimeters, 10 millimeter, and 8 millimeter wrenches. So, get these off. These big bolts go through the shock mounts that hold this thing down to the top of the transmission. Basically, encapsulated within these tubes here are rubber mounts. So that gives the handlebars a little bit of normal, kind of natural wiggle and anti-vibration relief for your hands. Ooh, yeah, thank you. The cable is right in the way. Okay. I should mention that also these pivot posts, we've seen them break on the BCS tractors as well, just from, you know, faulty welds at the factory. The procedure for changing those is a little easier, so I didn't bother making a video for those, because the thing is the BCS doesn't have a smart reverser system that flips over the reverser like this, so you don't have to deal with these gears or anything. So there's pluses and minuses to everything. I mean, the smart reverse system is very convenient when you're operating the tractor, and, you know, because when you reverse the handlebars around, the smart reverser turns the reverser the proper orientation for whichever way you're driving the tractor. You don't have to think about which way is forward and which way is reverse. But when you take the handlebar column off, it's a little more, or this pivot post is just a little more difficult. This bolt is being stubborn, so I'm having to coerce it out of here. There we go. This is a hammer in this video. Now, this thing's going to come up off of here. Get this tight. And there go all the rubber bushings flying off. So now there's these internal rubber bushings in here, which are locked in place. And then the factory also puts these external bushings on here, like this, Oh, I should mention that. Boy, I'm glad that fell out of there. This spacer is very important. This little spacer was on, well, it wasn't there actually. It was on, here, pull your camera back up there, Josh. So this spacer was on this rod. I forgot about that. This spacer was, when this thing slid through the bottom, you had this gear that was up on here, like so. Well, this spacer went here. So when I pulled it out, that spacer just fell down on the inside of the column. But when you slide this back through, after you wiggle it through the gear, you got to put that spacer up into place too. Again, you got to use along those pliers to get it up in there. So basically, where that spacer is going to end up under here, it's going to be trapped. Here's the slot where the gear runs up through there, and that spacer is going to run right through here. Spacer essentially goes through this hole. Oh yeah, that's right. You can slip the spacer in from the outside. I forgot about that. So that's a lot easier. So actually you can install the shaft through the gear and then put the spacer in from the outside. And then this thing here goes up against the spacer when it goes on there. So that holds it in. So, but that's the correct orientation there. So, anywho, when you put this back together, these things are kind of tight. So you'll just pop these on here, put these things in from the outside, like so, and then you, yeah, that's right. And then the whole column, that whole piece just drops down over there, trapping those washers in place. So it just stiffens up those mounts. Yeah, just like so. So you can see that they barely clear. Of course, I'm putting the old one back on here just so you can see what it looks like. But you've got to kind of, yeah, you got to kind of jam it down over there. So you kind of get the back work down, and then you get the front work down into place. A little bit of a pain, but it stiffens up those shock mounts quite a bit. On the smaller model Grillo tractors like the G107s and G85s, they use the same shock mount here, but they don't use these. The reason they use these on the 110 is because it's a heavier tractor, has a little longer handlebars, so you're putting a little more stress on it. So they want these there to stiffen it up a little extra. Big rubber washers and reinforcement steel washers. So that's it. Now, if you were changing this part for some reason, if one of these, like if you had a weld that failed here, or this hitch cracked off the back, which we don't really even like using this hitch anymore, we just go with a hitch that connects to the PTO, they're more durable. But if this piece had to be changed, you can see that this is the procedure you would use to change this part too, because all this has to come off first, and then of course you take off these 4 nuts here around the perimeter and replace this piece. So that gets that one too. And then putting it together is just in reverse order. You know, like I say, put the shock mounts in, just tweak everything down into place, hold your gear up into place, put it back through, reassemble everything, and then you're good to go. All right, I'm going to do a little addendum here. So this is all back together. We've got everything threaded back through. I've got the new spring in place with the washer at the end here. One thing I wanted to point out is that when you're getting this handlebar column back down onto the pivot post and getting this tab back in the back, it's a little bit of a job to get the tab aligned with the gear that it needs to drop into here, and getting the tab at the top aligned with the slot in that post. This is because what's fighting against you is your locking pin right here. This tube houses the pin that drops down into one of the 3 holes here to locate the handlebars side to side rotationally. So that pin, when I was pulling it up, it was no problem. It was helping me take it off. But now that I was pushing it back down, it was like, why can't I get this thing lined up? And finally, Josh went up and said, here, let me pull the pivot pin. So he pulled the lever at the top of the handlebars to pull the pivot pin up, and then it dropped right down into place. So that's a little trick that'll help you. It takes an extra person though. You can't do, well, unless you're really good with your legs, you might be able to reach up there and do that and stand on one leg, but I'll leave that up to you. The other thing I want to mention here is that when you're tightening these bolts back down, these bolts kind of clamp the bottom of the handlebar column together and serve as your adjustment for how tight it is on that pivot post. You don't want to just leave them half loose in there because it'll be so sloppy on the pivot post that it's just too much slop on the handlebar. So I've adjusted this so it's got some drag in it. And of course you want to grease up that pivot post before you put this back together because they come dry. So put some grease on it before you assemble it. I'm going to tighten these a little more and test it again. That's good. It still moves easily, but it's got a little stiffness to it. That's just what we want. So that way there's no slop on that thing. So we are ready to plug these gear shift levers back in and put this thing back into service. Thanks for watching.